Biden's laptop looks increasingly like this thing is a scam. By the way, Louise also posted a link to Powell's on Facebook if you want to check that out on our Facebook page. That Hunter Biden's laptop actually wasn't Hunter Biden's laptop. It was a laptop that had a bunch of Hunter Biden's data on it. And we know from, people who have looked at it, even Republicans who have looked at it, that the data has clearly been modified and tweaked, and somebody's been in there, right? But it turns out that around the time, this was shortly after Hillary Clinton got hacked and after the DNC got hacked, Hunter Biden went into rehab, and during that time, he had no access to his electronic devices. Yet, while he was in rehab, the password and phone numbers associated to his iCloud account were changed. And then an app called Hunter that can send email on someone else's behalf was installed. And then the emails and phone numbers associated with his account were again changed. And then once they got access to his iCloud account, they asked for a full copy of everything on it, downloaded all that, reset the password on his iCloud account, and then went back into, downloaded all of his Apple Store purchases, signed into another one of his accounts with a burner phone, restored the prior trusted phone number finally, and added software that could record calls to his phone, and then started erasing and then locked a laptop onto which they had downloaded all this stuff off of iCloud. And that laptop appears to be the laptop that showed up in this New Jersey computer store with the blind computer repair guy that he turned over to Rudy Giuliani. Now, how did he know to give it to Giuliani, or how did Giuliani know to go to ask him for it? Well, the evidence is not totally clear. Hunter wrote a great piece about this over on Daily Kos that I strongly recommend you check out. But it sure looks to me like this is another Russian hack, and that they downloaded all of this stuff, all of Hunter Biden's information, including the famous dick pic that Marjorie Taylor Greene showed to the world on C-SPAN yesterday during a live televised congressional hearing, that all of this stuff came off his iCloud account, that there never was a Hunter Biden laptop, that the whole thing was a disinformation campaign organized by the Russians and their allies within the Trump campaign, which would be specifically, Trump and Giuliani. This is incredible. They now have the whole timeline of how his iCloud accounts got hacked, and all this, the data was copied, spyware was installed, and then there was an attempt to cover up the breach, to restore everything so it looked like it hadn't been compromised. And then, a few weeks later, lo and behold, this laptop pops up with a copy of everything that was on his iCloud account. There are multiple cautionary tales here, but the biggest one, of course, is just because Republicans say it, it doesn't make it true. Oh, man, this is incredible. All right, another amazing story. Somebody called in the last hour and asked, is it possible that the RICO laws, I was talking yesterday about how the RICO laws could be used, if Fani Willis uses RICO to go after Donald Trump. The RICO laws have heavy, aggressive, strong, stronger than normal provisions that allow for the benefits, the outcome, the revenue produced by a criminal enterprise, by an organized crime enterprise, to be seized by the government. Now, Donald Trump has raised hundreds of millions of dollars by claiming that the election was stolen from him, which is a lie. And if he is prosecuted for that lie as part of an organized criminal activity, then possibly those hundreds of millions of dollars could be clawed back, or at least the money that was raised in Georgia could be clawed back. If this, if the only RICO indictment against him is the one out of Georgia, although I'm not ruling out the possibility, maybe even probability, that Jack Smith will be using a RICO law against him too, because it sure looks to me like what he was doing was, racketeering, influenced, corrupt organization stuff. So there's that. But now comes Missy Sims. Missy Sims is an attorney She was described by the New York Times as, quote, an Armani and Rolex-wearing observant Catholic from a small Midwest town who talks to God as she mulls her complex legal cases. She's also a constant TikTok poster whose dog has more followers than some celebrities. So it sounds like, you know, she's kind of an eccentric character, but she's doing something that could change the world. I mean, it's just amazing what Missy Sims is doing. She went down to Puerto Rico and saw the devastation from Hurricane Maria and compiled the scientific evidence that Hurricane Maria was amped up. It was $100 billion worth of damage, was amped up by climate change, and that the climate change is caused by the greenhouse gases produced by a whole bunch of fossil fuel companies at the same time that they were lying to us about what the consequences of their production of these fossil fuels would be. And so she has now filed a lawsuit against ExxonMobil, Chevron, Royal Dutch Shell, BP, and several other smaller companies, alleging that ever since 1965, these companies, which have produced 40% of the entire world's greenhouse gas emissions, let that sink in, that these companies were colluding to deceive the public. So it's basically, it's a RICO indictment that she's seeking. She's alleging, and this is the first time that there's been an allegation to this effect, she's alleging that the fossil fuel companies violated the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, the RICO Act. And that means that if she wins, she could seize their money. The money, or the federal government, or the, you know, whichever, I believe this is being filed in federal court. And it's a 247-page complaint. She says scientific studies have shown that man-made global warming made the 2017 hurricanes more severe, including Maria. She's suing on behalf of the people of Puerto Rico. And, you know, this is like the tobacco lawsuits. This is what happened in the 90s when, you know, a bunch of smart lawyers in the United States decided to go after the tobacco companies for lying to us since the 1930s about the fact that they knew that tobacco causes cancer, specifically lung cancer, but it also causes other kinds of cancers, kidney cancer and other cancer, and bladder cancer and whatnot, brain cancer. And they sued. And they got these multi-$100 million, you know, I have a friend who's a lawyer. I haven't talked to him in a couple of years, but used to know a guy who was a lawyer down in Florida who was one of the lawyers who participated in those lawsuits. And he walked away with millions and millions of dollars from suing the tobacco companies. You know, has his own private yacht and all kinds of stuff. So Missy Sims might be, you know, might be onto something. And right now, the public interest groups that are concerned about climate change, and, you know, good green groups, and government agencies, and of course the fossil fuel industry are all watching this very, very, very carefully. Because if she establishes a precedent here, and they're going to do everything they can to prevent her from doing that, but if she can establish a precedent here and she can nail these fossil fuel companies under the RICO Act for lying to us since 1965 about what they knew was going to happen, and we now know that several of these fossil fuel companies, particularly Shell and British Petroleum, if my memory serves me right, knew back in the 60s and 70s exactly what was going to happen. Some of their scientists laid out today's scenario with just shocking accuracy, that you'd have wild storms, that you would have floods, that you would have droughts, that you'd have forest fires, that sea level, you know, rise would begin, that, you know, that ecosystems would collapse. Within the fossil fuel companies, their scientists were telling them this, and the executives said, keep it quiet, bury that information, and let's fund, you know, people like Mark Morano, you know, who runs around saying, oh, there's no problem. It's, you know, I used to let him on this show to debate me back, you know, 10 years ago. I mean, I don't even debate these people anymore because it's just so obvious that they're just, you know, filthy, lying shills for the fossil fuel industry. You know, not necessarily Mark specifically, but you know, generically. Where does this go? How long does this last? How long can they continue to get away with this, these fossil fuel companies? I mean, my argument, and I made this on this program last week, and I've made it several times, is that we need to buy them out and fire their boards of directors and their executives and start them, doing appropriate things. But, hey, suing them under RICO sounds like a plan to me. So keep an eye on this. I'll keep you up to date on it. I'm gonna follow this lawsuit as well. But and if you want to know a lot more details about it, there is a really great in-depth story about it over at the New York Times on their website right now.